to present to you the first ever study to show that infants produce anticipatory stress responses. Sapolsky in his book mentions that we humans are so cognitively complex that we can turn the stress response on just thinking about a potential stressor. I found a study related to this topic called Infant Anticipatory Stress by Haley et al. It was just published last year, so this is a very hot research topic right now. Children, adolescents, and adults have been shown to produce anticipatory stress responses. But have infants? This is a big question. Let's take a look at what has been studied. Infants do produce stress responses to things like vaccinations. They do anticipate behavior out of the stress context based on memory and logic. But whether they're able to produce anticipatory stress responses is still unknown. I want to introduce you to the still face procedure, which was the stressor used in this experiment. This is essentially a relationship disruption between the mother and infant, and I'm going to show you a short video clip outlining this. In the video, I want you to focus on the transition from free play, when the mother is engaging and acting normally with her infant, to still face, when the mother completely ignores her infant.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
So as you can see, this is extremely frustrating to the infant, and it really shows that the infant's being stressed out. So the big question I said was, do infants show anticipatory stress responses? Let's take a look at the hypothesis. It can be broken down into 3 main components. 1, infants produce a stress response to their mother's still face. 2, infants anticipate the mother's still face 24 hours after previously being exposed to it. And 3, as a result of this, infants produce an anticipatory stress response. 30 mother-infant dyads were recruited for the study with 6-month-old infants. This was a 2-day study. The dyads were randomly assigned to a stress group or a control group. The stress group was exposed to the mother's still face as a stressor. The control group was not. On day 1, the mother-infant dyads were brought into a testing room. The mother was seated in a chair in front of her infant, who was seated in a car seat on the table in front of her. This ensured that they were at eye contact level. Now in the control group, we see that the mother and infant played freely for 10 minutes, so normally interacting, engaging, smiling. In the stress group, however, the mother had to alternate between 2 minutes of free play and 2 minutes of still face, as we saw in the video. Saliva samples were taken from the infants 3 times in each group, pre-task and 20 and 30 minutes post-task, so 20 and 30 minutes from the start of the experiment. This was to measure the cortisol levels in the infants. On day 2, 24 hours later, the dyads were brought back to the room. The infants were seated on the mother's lap this time, not in car seats. In the control group, we see that there was 10 minutes of free play, just like the first day. In the stress group, on day 2 there was no stressor, so there was always also 10 minutes of free play. The mother did not have still face. Saliva samples, again, were taken 3 times, once pre-task and twice post-task. Now it's important to understand that because there was no stressor, any rise in the cortisol levels in the infants has to have been due to anticipation of their mother ignoring them. Let's take a look at the results. Here we can see mean cortisol levels on the y-axis and pre-task and post-task saliva samples on the x-axis. In gray we have the control group, and in black we have the stress group. ANOVA and t-tests were done to measure and compare the mean cortisol levels between the 2 groups, as well as determine which increases in cortisol were statistically significant. This is denoted by asterisks. Now we see in the control group in gray that cortisol levels remain pretty steady. This is expected because the mother and infant are interacting normally. In the stress group, we see a dramatic increase in cortisol, specifically from pre-task to 20 minutes post-task. It goes from 4 to nearly 10, so this more than doubles. This supports hypothesis 1. Infants do produce a stress response to their mother's still face. Take a look at day 2. Control group, again, their cortisol levels remain steady, which is as expected. In the stress group, we still see an increase in cortisol levels from pre-task to 30 minutes post-task, about a 66% increase. Now, if you remember, on day 2 there was no stressor, so the mother was freely playing with her infant. However, the infant still produced a stress response, which is amazing. So we can see that hypothesis 2 and 3 are supported. The infant anticipated the mother's still face after returning to the same room and produced an anticipatory stress response as a result. To summarize, all our hypotheses were supported, and we can conclude that human infants are capable of producing anticipatory stress responses. There were a couple limitations to the study. 1, 3 of the mothers in the stress group during the experiment actually broke still face. And I don't blame them, because this is extremely hard to just sit there and ignore your infant, as you saw in the video. Another limitation was that the infants were seated on the mother's laps the second day. This may have delayed the cortisol response on day 2. As we can see, it peaks later on day 2 compared to day 1. The study also shows how complex cognitively the infants are, and how social learning is going on at such a young age in infants, as young as 6 months. So this is very adaptive from an evolutionary standpoint. If an infant is able to mount a stress response in anticipation of an event that may be harmful to them, they can guard against it. For example, parenting changes. If a parent changes his or her mood or attitude or care for the infant can mount an early stress response and guard against it. This is a type of survival mechanism. This study also leads the way for future brain studies. It shows how complex the social cognition in infants are, so future brain imaging studies can also show the same thing, hopefully. It would be very interesting to see if anticipatory stress is present in our non-human primate relatives, such as chimpanzees and baboons. To date, no studies have done this. They've studied stress in general with the present stressor, like Sapolsky, but they have not studied anticipatory stress, so this is the next step. This was the first study, as I mentioned, to show that infants have anticipatory stress responses, so we need more studies on this topic, perhaps in different stress contexts with younger infants to see if this actually starts younger than 6 months, which is very possible. But as of now, this study has opened up our eyes to the amazing phenomenon that infants can produce anticipatory stress responses. Thank you.